This is the Filmy McFilm Film Show.
Oi oi son.
Oi oi Deck.
Today we're talking about Withnail and I, written and directed by Brian Robinson, starring Richard E. Grant, Paul McGann and Richard Griffiths.
Yeah, so released in 1987.
Just looked that up, didn't you?
Yeah, I did look it. I knew
you putting the phone down.
I knew it was in the 80s, but I didn't know exactly.
Sorry, I grassed you up. Go ahead.
It's alright. For me personally, I just think it's brilliant.
This is brilliant, and interestingly, when it was getting made, it got produced by Handmade Films,
Yeah.
which was George Harrison, or Georgie Boy's movie company that he set up. I think, was it the early 80s he set it up? Or it might have even been it was late 70s, because I'm pretty sure they also made, what was that film? That weird, I'm not going to remember it, so I'm going to just go off that point anyway. But the one of the main big producer at the company didn't like the movie at all, and he was constantly trying to close it down. And even on the first day of filming, he was saying, I want to close it down, this isn't funny, you know, Richard Griffiths' character should be way more over the top and camper, this should be happy, you know, this should be he wanted it basically to be, I suppose coming from his point of view, the whole company got started in the Monty Python films.
Oh, right.
So I think that was his perspective of comedy, was it's got to be like this, whereas this is obviously a really, really black comedy. You meet them in the midst of a speed-fueled, crazed bender where they're living in absolute squalor, never doing washing up, on the dole, never employed, always going for acting gigs, never getting them, never seeming to wash, never seeming to wash their clothes, constantly drinking or snorting or injecting or smoking something.
Basically, yeah. And it starts off with poor old and I, because Withnail's the other.
Yeah,
character.
Withnail and I. Withnail was played by Richard E. Grant. Paul McGann plays I, and they just he's never addressed by his name. So I guess, I don't know if it was intentional beforehand or they just realised it after, but he's never actually given a name.
Well, he seems like, throughout the whole film, he seems to have a lot more, you know, about him than Withnail. He seems to, like, be a bit more sense about him, and, like, he's just, like, Withnail just seems to be, like, breezing through life and, like, using him as a...
I wouldn't say breezing, I'd say storming through like a tornado.
Storming through like a tornado. Paul and I is just, like, there in Withnail's shadows, just trying to, like, survive kind of thing.
Do you know what's funny? He seems a lot more fragile.
Yeah, he is.
Withnail's like this volatile, posh, upper class psychopath,
Yeah.
drug addict, fucking crazed monster, and I is a drug fueled
Maniac.
sort of a Woody Allen type character. Nearly, he's very neurotic and he's scared of everything, and he's always having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And he's worried about everything and afraid of his shadow.
And the way to get out of the panic attack is to do more drugs and drink, like, which is why it's so funny. Like, so it starts off in there.
But because you said something that made me remember something. So the and I character it's funny how you never call him I either. It's always the and I.
Yeah.
He essentially is Brian Robinson, the director.
Oh, I see.
And Withnail is based on one of his best friends who died in '95 of throat cancer. He was based more or less on his best friend who he lived with for a while, and he wrote this story, what was originally a novel that eventually got turned into the screenplay and got turned into the movie. He wrote it in the winter of 1969, based on his real life. It wasn't actually when Withnail was living with him, he'd just moved out.
Okay.
So Withnail moved out, well, whoever was based on Withnail, it wasn't called Withnail. He moved out, and Brian Robinson was living by himself in this flat in London, in squalor. He had a mattress on the floor. It was apparently just as horrific as the flat is in the movie.
Fucking hell.
Living in squalor by himself, with no money, no job, no food, no friends no friends around, no one around. You know, it wasn't like you could just be in a WhatsApp group and you're always connected to someone. and he found himself literally screaming at his floorboards because he was in just such a moment of desperation and like, what am I doing with my life? But then as he was screaming, he started to laugh, and he started to kind of nearly laugh hysterically, and he just sort of found a weird humour in his situation. And one of his only possessions that he hadn't sold was a typewriter, and he started writing what would become a novel and would eventually become the screenplay for the movie Withnail and I.
Wow.
So I found it cool that it was actually written in the winter of 1969, because it obviously didn't get made until, 16 years later?
Yeah.
No,
69, 79.
18 years later.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're in there. I'm surprised at that number one, because how could anyone live in that shit? Like,
People do.
And like in context.
There's a guy around the corner who lives in what I'd imagine, judging by the outside, he's known as Pigeon Man around here, because he's always feeding the pigeons.
I've seen him.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
He literally doesn't have a window. It's just not there, and at night he just puts plastic bags taped over it. I'd imagine the inside isn't too far off what is in the movie.
But going back to the movie, it's got so many quotable like moments in it. Like, I'm gonna call him I. It zooms into his eyes. He's reading the tabloids, and it's like, that's one of my favourite quotes. 30 million Londoners have to wake up to this shit every day. Like, I must get home and analyse this situation. And then when he gets home, like, if it isn't bad as that, here comes Withnail when he's having a like fucking, essentially a panic or drug-induced paranoia. We're in a crisis. And then he just goes to him, I can't think about that right now, Withnail. We've run out of wine. What are we going to do about it? And I just thought, this sets the tone of the whole...
It sets the tone of their whole relationship as well, is because it always feels like I is essentially kind of afraid of Withnail, not in... Because Withnail's a complete coward. They're both cowards, but Withnail's especially a coward.
Yeah.
So it's never from a physical point of view. It's more of a... Oh, please stop talking to me, or please don't go crazy and start going off on some mad tirade about something, and please don't make me do anything, essentially. He's always kind of like just scared of him and wants him to shut up. But one of my favourite quotes is, or just moments in the movies, like when you first introduced to Withnail, he's just reading the newspaper and going on about this shot putter who was on steroids but's now off it, and he's just going on this rant about, look at him. Look at Jeff Woad. He'd love to beat you up in an alleyway, wouldn't you? And you say, please no, but that wouldn't be good enough for him. He'd have to pin you down and really make you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, because Anai's like, can you please stop doing this? And you go, that wouldn't make him stop. Like, imagine the size of his balls.
He's such a selfish piece of shit as well. There's a bit later on where they're so poor and decrepit, and it's the middle of winter. So while out for a walk, they come up with this idea where they're gonna turn the heater off, but they know their neighbour's radiator is on one side of the wall, so they're gonna put on loads of, what's that stuff you put on?
It's essentially deep heat.
Deep heat. They're gonna put on loads of deep heat, which is that stuff sports people put on for their muscles, but it basically really heats up your muscles, and stand up against that wall. Yeah. And when it cuts to later when they're doing it, you see Withnail in the other room squeezing every last drop of it and putting it all over his body. And then he walks in and says, there was nothing left in the tube. No, nothing for you.
Poor Anai is just sitting there like he wants some as well. He comes out with it slobbering all over him and goes, there's none for you, so you'll just have to make do with it. And then he goes, we must get some booze. I demand some booze.
Yeah, so the crux of the film is, this isn't a really plot-heavy film, but
I
kind of didn't realise this until I was watching it, or I'd forgotten it, but this is a holiday movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a road trip.
Yeah, sort of a road trip movie, sort of a holiday movie, because Withnail, is obsessed with the idea, like, he needs to get out of London, he needs to get out of the flat, and he remembers that Withnail has this rich uncle who has a place out in the countryside, so he convinces Withnail when they're at the pub to call his uncle. So while he's calling his uncle, I head to the toilet, and he gets called a pufter by some big Irish guy in the pub.
Huge geezer, yeah.
And it cuts to him. He does the classic, pretends he didn't hear it, keeps walking into the toilet. And then as he's taking a piss, he's like, you hear his inner monologue because he's terrified of like, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna come in and beat him up? And I just love these moments where it's not very often in movies where the two, like your main characters are essentially, whether they're heroic or not, the heroes of the movie for you, and they're just such complete cowards. I love movies like this where not necessarily cowards, but where the main characters are just pieces of shit. It's kind of like the same appeal that Succession has.
Because he's reading like the graffiti on the wall, and he goes, it says, "I fuck arses." He's like, "Who fucks arses?"
Yeah. Does he fuck arses? Is he gonna come in here and fuck my arse?
Yeah. So like they go there, and like he comes out, and then Withnail's been on the phone to the old Monty boy for an hour, convincing him to like let them use the house. So basically, they go down there, don't they? It's in the middle. I don't know exactly where it is.
It's just generic countryside.
It's just a generic
wherever it is. They go down to pick up the keys off the fella, and this is where we get to meet what's his name, Richie Griffiths.
Oh my
God. He's kind of like
Fucking
Beetlejuice in this movie, where he's not actually in it all that much, but he
steals it.
Yeah, he
steals it, man.
Not to the point of Beetlejuice where he's all you remember, but he just comes in like a whirlpool. He plays this in the closet homosexual man, super camp, obsessed with like being an actor back in the day and all this and that. And immediately from the get go, once they're sitting down in his living room, like having a drink before they get the keys for the house out in the countryside, and you straight away get this weird vibe where he's really zeroing in on I.
Oh yeah.
And clearly wants to fuck him. And you even get the vibe that Withnail has said something to him on the phone, or made not promises but maybe hints in order to
secure
win favour to get the cottage for the weekend.
Yeah, so Monty makes a really like weird analogy to I when they first meet.
I wrote this down because I was so cracking up.
It's about growing vegetables, isn't
it? Where is it? I wrote this shit down. Oh, he's talking about growing vegetables and how much he loves it. And then when Withnail leaves the room, he turns to I and says, "There really is something wonderful about a firm young carrot." And just lingers, like, stares at him for a few seconds after. And do you know what? I didn't remember because I didn't watch this movie for probably 20 years. Or not that long, like 15 years. I don't remember how fucking intense his coming onto I is in this movie.
So
like, it is uncomfortable how creepy he gets with him at points.
He chases him around the room, and then he runs up to like when there's a slight break where like I don't know, one of them says like drink, and he's like sherry boys, and then he just runs off like and then I just runs up to him now and goes, "We need to go." He's off it, and he's also a raging homosexual. And then the funniest thing later is the cat runs in, and he's chasing after the cat. He goes, "You foul beast!
You've ruined another evening for me." Like, he lives alone, and he's just you get the feeling like he's going kind of crazy. And that's the thing in this movie. Like, everything in their life, everything in their circles is crazy. Everything's squalid. Their car is falling apart. When they finally get to the cottage out in the countryside, it's a complete hunk of shit and falling apart. And I love when they get there and immediately they start. There's no heating and there's like holes in the windows are broken and there's holes in the wall. So they start immediately just breaking up furniture and throwing it in the fire. And the next morning they go off looking for just a local that they can try and buy food off or buy some coal for the fire. So they meet a farmer and they start asking him, "Oh, you know my uncle, he owns the cottage over there." And he's like, "No, I don't know him." And they name the cottage and he's like, "Oh, yeah, he hasn't been here for years. He was with his son last time."
Yeah. And
which is obviously, they're like, "Oh, that's him," because it's obviously like some gay lover or French boy he brought for the weekend.
Funniest thing about that, he's like, "Oh, the French guy, the queer one." And they're like, "Yes, that's him." And then I think Withnail keeps going, "Are you the farmer?" He goes, "It's fucking obvious he's the farmer. Stop asking that." He's driving a tractor. So it's all like a shit hole.
No, that's also, when they meet the farmer, that's one of my favourite lines as well, where he says, we've gone on holiday by accident.
Yeah,
We don't know what to do. We need food.
Yeah, we're here by accident. So like everything they try and do, like as you said, Declan, it's like they can never kind of catch a break at the same time. Like every little thing they try and do is just so over the top. Like find wood and then it's pissing down with rain, and they're just not having a good go of it. Like the first couple of days.
I think he cooks his boots straight away.
Oh yeah, he just puts it in and he goes round with like...
Can you actually do that as well?
I would assume it would...
I mean, it's leather. I guess it's some sort of substance.
Burn, yeah. And then eat them, yeah.
No, but I mean, you couldn't eat your fucking plastic jacket.
No.
Can you actually eat your boots?
Probably, yeah.
Anyway, he eats his boots, so he spends the rest of the winter in the countryside walking around barefoot.
With like flour bags on.
And they go a bit crazy. They have a gun, and at points they're trying to like... They're going around in the river looking for fish, shooting into the river and all sorts. And they end up in the pub. And this is where...
You didn't explain the whole bull story, man.
Oh, was that before or after?
That... Ooh...
It's probably
No,
before.
I think...
Who cares?
So what happens is... There's a...
So they're back with the farmer.
The farmer, basically... Because back to it, I does all the work. Basically.
Yeah,
Withnail just gets really fucking hammered all the time.
Yeah,
like
never contributes to anything.
Never. It's basically just sums up me and your use.
Right? I was going to say that. It's basically you.
Yeah.
Get drunk and then be like, "What's going on?" Huh?
Well,
falling over.
I'll be staying around Declan's house and it'll be up in the morning on Tesco's with like loads of food, and I'll just wake up with my cigarette in my mouth, like, "Where have you been?"
Or like when we were carrying home that really drunk person that time in Camden.
Oh yeah.
And I was having to carry them because you couldn't help carry them because you were like making it worse somehow because you were so drunk. And then so I was like, okay, just use the sat nav so we figure out where we're going. And then you were like, you couldn't do that either. So I had to also hold the phone with one hand while carrying this person.
So basically, when they meet the farmer guy, bless him, I goes out to like, just find general firewood, as you said, and general like eggs and random shit. As you would do, like if you stayed on a farm. I stayed on a farm in somewhere Lake District once.
Did you?
Years ago. This when when you was young going on holiday.
Oh, when you don't get a choice.
You go to these weird like cottages, which are quite nice. And whoever's house it was like the farmer's second house. And then in the morning, just like deliver us eggs. Like here's some fresh eggs.
That sounds good.
So anyway, that's what normally would happen. But one of my favourite lines in it is when he goes originally to go looking for it. And he knocks on an old woman's door, and it's like, "Can you just give us anything like wood and just some eggs?" And then she's like, "No." And then she slams it shut. And he just goes. It just tallies up today. He just goes, "I'm not from London." Yeah. And she's like,
he says it really quick. He leans in to say it to a tit.
Yeah. So I'm not from London. And then he's like, "This is not the book I've read by H.G. Wells. I thought they'd just be sitting around drinking cider." So he goes out there, and then she does tell him about the farmer, and he's got like a leg brace. So obviously, then they find him later on, and it's
he says he said, "What happened to your leg?" And he's like, "Oh, I've got an angry bull up there."
Yeah.
So they meet him the next day where he's actually got where he's supposed to be getting some food for him.
Yeah.
And somehow Withnail and I are walking along, and they forget to close the gate, and the bull gets out, and Withnail immediately hands I all the groceries and jumps over the wall.
Yeah.
And I's kind of stuck there like rabbit in the headlights, not knowing what to do. And the farmer's shouting to him, "Just run at it, shouting, show him you're not afraid." And he freaks out and starts charging at it. And I was thinking, watching it, that must have been a dangerous stunt. Because that is a real bull.
Yeah, I know.
And he's really in shot with him, really running at it, flapping his arms about.
So basically that happens, and then after that, instead of like helping again, they just say, Withnail just goes, "Let's go to the pub." So they trek all the way to it's called the Crow, I think. And that was one of the best scenes because the what do you call it? Landlord was an absolute mess as well.
Yeah, he was just drunk, and they were just telling him nonsense stories like, "Oh, when I was in the army, blah blah blah."
Yeah,
and he's going along with it and loving it and giving them. I'm pretty sure he was giving them free drinks.
So basically, what happens is he used to like serve in the army, and then he goes, "Did you used to serve?" So Withnail, the little snake he is like, "Yes, in Ireland," or something So it's like, what you doing down here? It's like doing a survey for Farmers Monthly about tinkers and like. So he just gives them like free drinks, and that's when we're introduced to the fucking
the poacher who comes in. I never realised he was supposed to be a poacher the first time around when I was watching it, but I was probably too young and dumb. But he comes in and immediately just leans over the bar, pours himself like a half a pint, and before it's even set, starts downing it.
Yeah.
You're like, who the fuck is this? Then he pulls out an eel. Is it an eel? Some sort of long fish.
It's an eel, yeah.
Out of his trouser legs and slams its head on the bar to kill it. And hands it over, and then pulls out a pheasant out of his collar pocket.
Yeah.
So they go over and they're kind of like asking him, please can we have some food? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
Immediately takes a dislike, especially to Withnail. He's like, no, I'm not giving you anything.
Withnail, yeah.
But then he kind of changes his tune. He's like, oh, maybe I'll come up and see you one night and give you a hair.
And again, he calls them gay as well. Like,
yeah.
You queers need to sort your life out.
So he basically threatens them and says he's going to come and see him in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So from that moment onwards, they're terrified. Especially Withnail. They're obsessed with the thought that this poacher's going to come in and beat the shit out of him in the middle of the night.
And don't forget, they're probably on a fucking concoction of bare psychedelic.
Yeah, so I couldn't work out if they were still doing speed at this point, because I felt like
you can never know.
I felt like part of the reason they wanted to get out of the city was to get away from the speed. Well, that was why I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Because it didn't explicitly say it. Because we didn't even cover Danny, the drug dealer that comes around.
Oh, he's brilliant. Man.
He's like
so
this retarded Brummy accent. He's one of those classic drug dealers where they kind of they guilt you into like staying with them for a bit and hanging out as if you're mates, and also does that whole I can out drug you thing.
And then Withnail's like, I can take double what you can take, like, and then he opens like, oh no, we're back to another point when he's talking about that career change where he's like, there's a baby that pisses itself.
Oh yeah.
That bit.
He's like, little girls love babies that piss themselves, so I'm gonna make a doll that shits itself.
yeah. I just burst out laughing, and like, because like drug dealers are so fucking stoned all the time, that idea to them would be like, I've hit the jackpot here, like we're gonna just up it. But then they go back, then they like kind of like run off, don't they?
So they go back to cottage, and they're sleeping in separate rooms. And Withnail, being a coward, he sneaks into his room and he wants to sleep in bed with him because he's terrified of sleeping alone. And I's kind of having a go at him, like, shut up, get out, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then they start hearing noises in the night.
Yes.
And like, what's that? And they hear
the window breaking.
They're saying, oh, it's just the wind. But then they hear the window break. And then someone's sneaking in. And they sneak into the other room. And they're like, what the fuck? And then the door swings open. And it's Richard Griffiths, the big gay uncle, who's come in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
And also snuck into one of their rooms immediately.
He just goes, Monty, you stupid cunt. And he goes,
Monty, that's it.
He goes, oh my boys.
Yeah, because I never thought as well, but he finds them both in bed together, so he's immediately like,
yeah, so I think, I was trying to work that out yesterday when I rewatched it. He thinks they're both bumming.
I don't know if he does, because later, basically, this is where the harassment, harassment of I goes off the Richter scale in the next like 30 minutes. Because once they're stuck in the cottage together, there's this weird, they kind of need him relationship starts where he's, buying all the food and like suddenly they've been essentially like starving. Yeah. They've been living in squalor, but no longer in London, where you can kind of get by a little bit, literally out in the countryside with no food.
Yeah.
So he brings loads of food. He buys them boots. He brings them to the countryside. He brings them to the like local town. Gives them spending money to go about.
He gives them boot. He gives them like 20 quid to buy boots because they're just walking around in like flour sacks, and then they just spend it down the boozer
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, fuck it, like, what are you gonna do when he asks about the boots? And Withnail just goes, I'll say there's a farmers convention. It just goes in there.
But you can tell as well, Withnail's essentially, he's trying to pimp I out, because you can tell he wants to keep his uncle around, Uncle Monty, because he's like suddenly like giving him a free weekend and giving him dough and giving him food. And you can tell he's whispering in Monty's ear whenever I is not about, because Because even when they first meet back in his house originally, he says like, "Oh, it's been so good to meet you. You are very handsome."
Yeah.
And he's like a bit like, "What? What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about?"
But even I comes out at one point and like whispers to Withnail like, "I'm not going to be staying around here just so you can live off your uncle and I'm the object of attention." And he's like, "We'll just do lunch."
Yeah. So eventually, Uncle Monty runs into his room in the middle of the night.
Oh, that's so fucking funny, man. Because Withnail's passed out. So he's literally just... I think Monty knows what Withnail's like and just basically bought like bare bottles of wine because he knows that he's just going to drink one after the other to zone in into him, to target and I basically. And why does he even? Obviously, he just comes down there because he wants to try and fuck
down.
And I, you know what I mean? He knows they'll be there.
He would have met him, got all like been a feverish sweat after he left, and then just for days he's sitting there like thinking, "Oh, that little young actor bum is out in the countryside all alone."
I can imagine him like with a tiny glass of sherry, like that boy,
slowly getting more beads of sweat falling on his forehead as he's getting all hot and bothered.
He does like me. I see him gazing.
It's the same thing you do, where like a girl smiles at you and looks your way for a second on the train, and you're like, "Oh, definitely in here."
Put it in the Rush Hour Crush is my version. But yeah, like he comes back, and then it kind of really does start to kick off. Man.
It really is disturbing as well because he is just not taking no for an answer.
He comes in the dressing gown. Boy, I know you're not asleep.
Yeah, and I've seen you not looking at me.
Yeah. I've seen you gazing across from me. We need to take our chances. No,
but
I said no.
He is kind of misleading. Not misleading, but with he's got this sort of social anxiety tick where when he's incredibly uncomfortable, he can't not smile. Yeah. So he's because he's always uncomfortable around Monty. But he's always sort of smiling at him in this creepy, weird way.
But I think I did, or one of them, or even Withnail, because we don't know what Withnail's been doing. As you said, he's probably just chatting bare shit. I think one of them did say they were going out because the way that he comes into the room, he's like,
"Well, he
wants to sleep alone tonight. I think he should sleep."
That's the
alone
thing
tonight.
that no. Do you know what I kind of realised what it was? Is he thought they were just fucking.
Oh,
but
okay.
Eventually, because he's trying to get him out of his room and he's just not leaving. He's like, "I love you, boy. Experiment. Let yourself go."
Yeah.
And eventually, he just says. He said, Monty obviously thinks they're fucking, but and I says we're in love, and that's when he's he's like, "I'm so sorry," blah blah blah, and it's actually kind of nearly a bit sweet because he backs off completely and he leaves in the morning. And he leaves this like poetic fucking over the top note of why he must leave and let your love flourish or whatever the fuck.
Yeah. The best one is when he's Withnail's already like passed out and gone to bed. And he's like, no, and then he goes, "I can see I'm not going to win now. It's not the first time I've been left alone." And then he just runs up to bed and he runs in to get like his blanket or something. And when he runs out, Monty's already knocking the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just like, "Oh, shit."
Is he sleeping alone tonight?
But Monty's a big geezer as well, man. Like,
oh, mate, it's so horrible.
Oh, it's so funny.
What a horrible fucking thing.
He steals the show, Monty. Like,
yeah, so they're there for a little bit longer and then they head back to London in a storm, innit?
No, the storm's on the way up, I think.
No, there's a storm on the way back.
Or both, yeah. Maybe.
Well, there's a storm on the way back. I know that the producers didn't want to actually fund that, and they felt it wasn't necessary for the plot and it'd be too expensive.
Yeah.
And the director, Brian Robinson, was adamant that it had to be kept in the movie, to the point where they withheld 30 grand of his pay, salary for the movie, in order to keep it in. And even then, after the movie came out and they saw that it was good and whatever, he never ever got his 30 grand back.
For someone who was broke, man, he's stuck to his guns.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I don't know if he was as broke at this point, but yeah, you got to give it to him.
But what happens, like, in between, like, they head back to London, and then And I is just...
Well, they get...
He's asleep, isn't he?
Well, And I... And I...
Oh, no, because he sleeps in the car.
He sleeps in... He's
basically... He runs away.
He's They're driving away, and he's like, I can't handle this rain anymore. I got to sleep. I'm so tired. So he goes to sleep.
And then he wakes up.
He wakes up to Withnail drunkenly driving the car down the motorway.
Yeah.
And he keeps asking him to stop, and he's like, no, I'm making great time. He's like swerving, nearly like crashing into cars on the motorway and like overtaking police cars.
I want to just touch on the soundtrack before we continue here. The soundtrack's actually really quite cool as well.
Oh, it's great.
When he's like driving erratically, Jimi Hendrix just shows dun 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 dun, and he's just like driving about.
It's funny you say that actually, because apparently this was the movie that was the nail in the coffin for the Hendrix estate. No longer, they basically took the reins back on how freely their Jimi Hendrix's music would be allowed to be licensed, and they started really paying attention and looking at choosing specifically what would get the rights and what wouldn't, because they were so sick of his name being associated with drug culture.
Oh, really? Well,
but
that doesn't matter. But it kind
still
of
really
works.
good.
Yeah,
it's still really good.
Time. And then obviously, even I don't get why And I is like just like do not just pull over, which he tried. It's like,
well, he is like that.
Yeah, but then obviously it's obvious that he's going to get nicked because of how drunk he is. Like he's just driving along, drinking a bottle of like whiskey. Like,
he pulls over, and he's just. To be honest, you wouldn't even need to like smell him,
tell him straight away.
Or hear him speak. The look of his eyes, like one thing you'd have to say, and I don't know if it was more a bit of method acting going on, but the makeup, the look of him is perfect because they really look like shit. Like the colour tones in their faces, and
doing it at the same time.
Maybe. Well, no. Richard E. Grant's allergic to alcohol in real life, so he definitely wasn't drinking. Maybe he, that doesn't mean he didn't like to fucking indulge in other things.
Yeah,
There's plenty of other things on the list you can do. But yeah, I don't like the makeup of him. He genuinely, that was the face of a bender.
He looked like ghosts. Like, he was so thin.
It was just, and the eyes were so sunken in and blotchy and horrible. And the police are immediately like, "You're fucking hammered, son." They nick him.
But then he's got that machine.
Well, yeah, because he's got this invention at the start of the movie that he's talking about. Because when they're first driving to the cottage at the start of the movie, he says, "When we next pull over, let's try and find a child." And the eye's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he says, "I want to get some piss." Some clean
child's piss.
Some clean piss, because he's got this contraption basically where you have a hose and a bottle, and it's he has it in his zipper so that he can fake doing a urine test if they ever get pulled over. So naturally, he tries to use this invention. He gets caught in the police station trying to use his little contraption.
He goes behind the curtain.
Yeah, and the policeman pulls the curtain and pulls the strap out, and he's just stuck there with fake piss pour. Which is, well, you never find out whose piss he was using or where he got it from.
Probably And I or something.
Well, And I would be useful. He'd fucking hammered all the time as well.
That's true. Probably Monty.
But yeah, he gets caught, and we don't really see the repercussions. They're just back home then. So they get home to the flat, and they find the drug dealer, Danny.
Yeah.
Was
squatting there.
He was squatting in there. He's in their bed. But this is what cracks me up about the And I character. He is like he's a typical, in quotation marks, nice guy, where he's always amicable, but not because he's actually a nice person, because he's just such a coward. Even when he finds Danny the drug dealer in his bed and he pulls the things off, he says, I give you 10 minutes to get up and get out, because I'm going to sleep.
He's like, how did you get in here? He's like, how did he get in? Like, he
says, I'm very industrious. I climbed up the climbed up the drain pipe.
And who's that massive geezer in the bar?
Well, he calls him a racial slur.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised about that. Actually.
Well, I don't know if it's one of those things where that would have been
who's
a more.
That? Yeah.
I think it would, maybe was that a more general term in 1969.
Yeah,
maybe it's retro. I don't know. I feel like it was always a slur.
Yeah,
but I don't know. But anyway, so they. Again, though, that's the sort of great thing about this movie. It's like an insight into that mad world where, if you came home, most people, if you came home, you found someone in your bed that you kind of know, who had broken into your flat and was sleeping in your bed, you'd be fucking livid. They kind of just settle down into a chat and start passing the spliff about.
To be honest, like, if you think about it, these two guys, Withnail and I, are just so drunk and high all the time. Like, I just don't think. I think their brains are just so ruined.
Oh yeah,
that
cool.
Someone in the bed would be like a bit of an annoyance. Be like, please, I'm desperate to like sleep to get.
Yeah, because it's the same kind of thing. Like,
we've done it before.
If you were homeless, it's that same kind of thing where you're just like you're living second to second. You're like, alright, whatever gets me through the next 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But it is funny. I was thinking about that because when I was young, actually, I don't know how I felt about it when I was young because I would have been so young when I watched it, but. It is that weird thing where it's still sort of appealing for some reason. You know, like, do you ever have that thought where if I got a terminal illness, or forget the terminal illness thing actually, imagine you could predict the future, and you asked, okay, what's my life going to look like? And it said, okay, none of the things you're working on are going to come true. They're all going to fail, and you're never going to get married or have kids. It nearly would be kind of like an excuse to be like, oh, okay, well, I can just fucking ride it till the wheels come off and be a layabout and just go on benders all the time. Do you know what I mean? And it says you're going to die when you're 58 anyway. So,
yeah, but you still need to get like dough to do shit like these people do.
Fucking go on the dole.
And you still
go
have,
on benefits.
You still have other commitments like.
Like what?
Like I've got 2 nieces and shit. Like.
Yeah, fair enough. But I'm saying,
I get your point.
You only really have responsibilities to get enough water and food and shelter to survive. Obviously, you don't want to be a cunt in real life and not see your nieces, but just in that scenario, do you ever get that fantasy of like, oh, what if I did just say fuck it and just become a degenerate?
All the time.
Yeah, it doesn't really look fun sometimes.
I do it after.
It's essentially you live in the rock star lifestyle without any of the money or fame.
I do it after a hard day at work. I'm like, I might just get absolutely blitzed today, man. Like
I sometimes think that should be a thing where you book off 2 weeks, not to go on holiday somewhere, but just to go on like a bender and then have 4 days at the end of it.
There is companies that do that now.
What do you mean?
They give like 4 hangover days a year. So basically,
oh really?
Yeah. So basically, at any time of the year, you got 4 days. You can just turn around and be like, "Sorry, I went on an absolute mad one last night. I cannot work because of the hangover." They just allow it.
Do you know what? That is so fucking genius.
Yeah.
Because, like, that encouraged such a level of honesty. Because let's be real, like, actually. Let's pretend for a second.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically. That's the word I'm looking for. Hypothetically, some people I've heard use their sick days mainly just for when they fancy a day off or for when they've got hammered the night before. Hypothetically, I hear that happens.
Yeah, well, hypothetically, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Most of the time I can work on a hangover.
You were born in England, weren't you?
Yeah.
Cool, not Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, just check it. No, it's definitely England.
The closed door.
I have an Irish passport.
It's for those tickets.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, shut that door.
Technically, hypothetically, I've always been able to work on a hangover unless you get those hangovers when you're on death's door, like where you can't.
Yeah, I've never had one of those where I need to work the next day. Like those ones where you're actually ill, like you're throwing up and shit.
I've never had that. No.
When you're like it's more like alcohol poisoning, nearly. But I always see my problem is I must have quite a slow metabolism where I often wake up drunk still, and my hangover kicks in after, like I'm awake. Yes. So I used to get fucked over where I'd wake up on like a Wednesday and be like, oh, this is so weird, I'm not even hungover, I feel great. And I'd go off to work and I'd feel great and I'd be fucking double gunsing people and be like, yo, what's going on? And then by 10 a.m. I'd feel like shit and it'd all come crashing down.
You must have felt... I used to hate, because I've had that before, I used to always struggle like still being like drunk. Like Because
yeah.
if you're too like over the top and excited, like I always used to get it on a Monday, because I used to bang it on the weekends, and then you used to be like going in like what, like, and everyone would be like, "Are you okay?" Like,
Wait, you'd come in drunk on a Monday?
Sometimes, mate.
What? So you would get hammered on a Sunday? Yeah,
Sometimes there's been certain weekends.
Yeah, definitely.
Where you go boom, boom, boom. Sunday, like it goes like this. Friday you go on a big one. Saturday you're like, oh, I feel like shit, but might as well go for a pint. And then on Sunday you're like, I feel like double shit. But maybe a quick pint will sort it out.
Kick that can down the road.
Yeah, and then
tomorrow's
it like happens.
problem.
And then Monday finally rears his ugly head, and you're like, I'm fucked.
Have you ever actually had a beer at lunchtime then to settle yourself?
When?
No, have you?
At work?
Yeah.
No.
No?
No.
I've done it when working at home.
Have you?
Yeah.
We're going to cut this out, aren't we?
No. Well, if you want to. Do you want to? Say it now, because then we just talk about something else.
Yeah.
You do? You sure?
Yeah.
But you didn't even say anything bad.
I have had one, yeah.
Would you want to cut this bit out now?
Yeah, cut it out.
Well, why did you say that? We'll cut out you saying it.
Because I know that my parents know that I do that. And they'll be like, you shouldn't be drinking at work.
Well, if you know, they know it. Oh,
Yeah,
well, I'm not cutting it out for your parents not doing it.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous. I thought you were worried about work. But anyway, you fucking dick.
I am not Withnail. I cannot do
Yeah,
that.
anyway, we were all saying that hypothetically anyway. So, also, do you know, well, hold on, let's finish the movie then. We haven't even finished the plot. So, the big ending, essentially, is they're all sitting around, they've come back to the house, they find the squatters, they're sitting around, they're smoking a spliff, and I gets a phone call.
Huge split.
A huge spliff, it is very big. So, I goes down to the phone box down the road to make a phone call, and it's from his agent, and he comes back and he finds out that the role he kind of had auditioned for at the start of the movie, that you've heard little murmurs about during the movie.
Yeah.
He's been offered the lead role, and this is like essentially you get the feeling it's going to be his big break financially. Is going to be massive for him, and it's just huge. And it cuts to like a few days later, and you see he's got a haircut, he's got new clothes, he's looking off the drugs.
He's looking dapper, man.
And he's looking really good, and he's basically packed to leave. And Withnail is still looking like shit, still looking like a vampire, still looks like he hasn't washed his clothes, and he's trying to like get him to leave, like get him to stay. Like,
so he's trying to get him drunk again.
Yeah, he's saying like,
it's like
you can stay for one last drink.
I nicked this from blah blah blah, and like Monty, have one, and like is trying to like spread his wings and go.
He's saying like, I'm gonna miss the train.
Yeah, I was trying to think like. I had a brief flash like, you leaving Withnail there? And I thought for a second, that's a bit out of order. And I thought,
he's gone.
No, it's blatantly not. You could not do anything with
Withnail. He's his friend, but he is a cancer to everyone around him, especially himself. And so Withnail says, I'll walk you to the train station. So they're walking along in the rain, and in the end, I says, he kind of stops and.
Yeah,
they live in Camden, so they're always walking past the zoo.
It's like a shit day. Like he's even trying to get him to go back. Like
he says
it's
like
a horrid day.
He says I don't want you to walk me to the restaurant. He says I'll miss you. And he says I'll miss you too.
Yeah.
And he leaves them and he walks on, and you know, Withnail knows as well. He's fucked.
Yeah.
He's going off to have his career, and he's going to be in squalor. He doesn't know how to not be a complete fuck up. It's just in his blood to be a fuck up.
I suppose he'll just hang around with Danny the drug dealer.
Yeah, he'll just go from thing to thing. Yeah. And if the movie finishes where he gives recites a Shakespeare verse,
which Monty was going on about.
Yeah.
I think I'll pay this part one day, and you'll be brilliant.
Yeah. And he recites the verse to the wolves that happen to be there.
it is a wolf.
Yeah, because parts of London Zoo, you can actually see just from walking around the side. Also, here's a tip: if you ever want to go for a nice walk in Camden, if you're a tourist or whatever, walk along one of the canals that goes by the side of the zoo, and you actually not only walk along the canal, it's a really nice walk, but you can see about 5 or 6 exhibits for free from the other side where the zoo is.
I was so like, even though he was reciting this fucking Shakespeare speech, I was more interested in like the wolf thing, and I was like, can you really see that from
But
there? You can't get that close now, surely.
Yeah, you can, but it's pretty electric as well because he's doing it in the rain.
Yeah, and he's
in
like,
the last moments of the
like
film,
hand motions, like,
and he's doing it all dramatically to these wild animals, and you can kind of see that he's probably the better actor out of the two.
Oh, he clearly is. Yeah.
I don't mean Richard E. Grant. I mean the character.
Yeah,
is the better actor out of him and
yeah.
I. But he'll never because he's just
too used.
He's
to,
volatile,
like, drugs,
poison. Yeah, he'll never ever get
Yeah.
it together. And it's quite a sad ending. And it was originally supposed to be even sadder. It's supposed to end with Richard E. Grant killing himself.
No, that would have ruined.
Well, not Richard E. Grant. That would have been really sad. Withnail killing himself.
No,
it would have been unnecessary.
I'm glad they ended it as it is.
Oh, it's perfect. The ending
because it would have been like, this is such a funny film about some guys, but someone couldn't beat their addiction, so they killed themselves. So it would never be the same.
It wouldn't have suited the film.
It'd be like leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah, but it just
it
just wouldn't have suited.
I suppose you got to round it off in one way or the other, but yeah, I think great film. You got to give it a chance. It does take a little bit of a while to like take off.
Well, I would disagree with that. I would say if you're not liking it in the first 10 minutes, it's just not for you. But
okay.
If you like it, you're gonna love it.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
you're gonna love it pretty much straight away.
It's very quotable. It's a very good film. I would give it a watch. As Declan said, if you don't like it in the first 10 minutes, the humour may be a bit like hard. Not hard for some people to understand, but sort of kind of dark humour.
I mean,
so do you know what I'm trying to say?
If you just describe the plot like we did,
it sounds bad.
It doesn't sound like you would automatically assume that's going to be a comedy.
Mm.
But for me, it is an absolute easy recommendation.
Yeah,
it is a brilliant movie. It's a very unusual sort of movie. It's not a movie I've ever really seen anything quite like before in terms of like tone and what it's like and what it's about and the kind of humour it has. It's got full of brilliant performances, full of very brilliant quotes and brilliant characters and memorable scenes, and it's probably in the top 10 British comedies ever made.
I would say that as well.
And if that doesn't give you an idea of the kind of esteem it should be held in, then I don't know what will. So, till next time, go fuck yourself.
Dickheads.
Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.